Welcome back, Warriors. This is the third video. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to do what I call the second pass of Servqual analysis. So if you haven't done the work or you don't have the foundation of knowledge that gets you to this point, and you're not able to get to this point on your own, and you don't feel comfortable with that, it's certainly okay. But watching this video right now is probably not going to be very productive for you. So you might want to go back and either watch it all from the beginning, so video number 1 and then this one, or maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe you just need to pick up with video number 2, and that will get you to here. So either way, at this point, we're going to assume that you're good to go and you're ready to drive on with what we're going to cover here. So what we're going to cover here is just a quick review. We've got our two-dimensional differencing. We have our average. This is two-dimensional differencing. Backing up even further, we have our Servqual results that are not in the two-dimensional differencing yet. And that's these pairs of perception average of averages for the tangibles and expectation survey average of averages for the tangibles, and so on for the rest of the dimensions of service quality. What we did is we went ahead and plotted each one of these dimensions using these average of averages. So for example, to plot this T here for tangibles, we start first with our perception axis, which is our horizontal axis, and we walk out here to this column to 2.15. Now, how do we know that we're not over here? Well, just, if it's not over 2.5. So if it was 2.56, we'd be in this column. Because it's 2.15, we're in this column. Then, to determine whether we go up or down and how far we go, we look at this axis, which is our expectation axis. And so we're going to walk up this way 5.6. And that's an example. We didn't go here because we're greater than 5.5. So we do that for each of the respective dimensions of service quality. And then to interpret what it means, we use this kind of cheat chart. Although after doing this a few times, I'm convinced you will not need this. And I would encourage you to get to the point to where you don't need this. But it's good for now. And it's a good idea to get in the habit of starting up here, because this is what I call the priority quadrant, and working our way clockwise. Priority quadrant of sustain. Customer has high expectations that we did not meet. Customer has high expectations that we did meet, so we want to sustain that. Customer had low expectations, but we exceeded them. Might be wasting some effort here. We might. And here, if we had anything here, customer had low expectations, and essentially we met those low expectations by not putting much into it. So we want to sustain that, although we might have some wasted effort here. Okay. So that's what we all covered last video. That's what we're looking at now. How do we do the second pass of analysis and determine, okay, what do we do with this nebulous thing of tangibles? Well, the first thing we're going to do is go back and look at the specific averages that correspond to the questions that make up that. And we know we have this hidden. We'll go to unhide, and that pops, or maybe we got to go here. Maybe we got to highlight of both. Sorry. So we know that generating this plot on the two-dimensional differences, that is driven by these average of averages, which were generated from these questions. So we want to go back and pull those questions back out and see what they tell us. And we're going to do that on this next tab for tangibles, because that's in our quadrant of priority. So here we go. All right. Okay, we're going to talk two examples of what we might see. So for now, I want you to ignore what's on the right side of the screen. We'll just kind of gray this out so it doesn't distract you. I'm just blacking it out. Kind of like Metallica, the Black Album. Sorry. So what are we looking at? We are looking at the averages from the specific questions on the expectation survey. That is what this tells us. And the average of the averages was that. Okay. What do we have down here? We have the same thing, only for the perception surveys. We have the averages for the respective questions, and then we have the average of the averages. Okay? So what do we want to do now? Well, we want to see where the greatest gap is. And gap is essentially synonymous. Well, not synonymous, but in this context, it's very close in concept to a difference. I mean, think about that. The more you like Metallica and the less I do, or probably vice versa, that's a gap between your view of the band and my view of the band. I don't know if that's the best example, but we can do this mathematically, and so we will. So I'm just going to go down here, and what I'm looking at is the gap between the expectation that hotels should have clean sheets and the perception of this particular service that our hotel did have clean sheets during the stay. So to do that, I'm just going to take the difference. I'm going to take this number here, and I'm going to subtract that number there. That tells me the nature of that gap between the questions and, really more importantly, the topic tangibles about clean sheets. Enter. 5.8. Okay. That 5.8 is less valuable, more valuable once I look at the other gaps between the other questions. And to get those, all I have to do is drag, because nothing is locked down. Nothing is referenced, has a hard reference. So, interesting. Look at that. Look at the difference between this gap and that gap. That's quite a bit of a difference. The range, when we talk about the range between two numbers, is the larger number subtracted by the smaller number. So that range is 5.1. Quite a difference when we think about our Likert scale goes from, as a 7-point scale. So very, very high expectations that there would be clean sheets in a hotel. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, but geez, we did not do well there. So to get to the point, that is we want to explore. Explore meaning attack in our process. So what we're going for is the root cause, and we're going to run with root cause and talk about root cause analysis here in several weeks in the second part of our course. But for now, we want to find out what in our process is preventing us from having clean sheets at the interval and type that will meet the needs of our customers. I mean, some people expect clean sheets 3 times a day. We know that's an outlier. I think generally anybody who stays at the hotel expects the room to be cleaned once a day, and when they show up, that there's clean sheets on the bed. Or if you have an accident, somebody throws up, something like that, that they're pretty responsive and clean the sheets. That could go under responsiveness. But the main thing is that probably once a day. So what in our process is preventing that? And how do we fix that? And we could think about the 6 M's. Do we not have machines that can keep up with washing all of the sheets in our hotel? Do we not have enough sheets on hand to keep up with that turnover? Do we not have enough sheets in inventory? Are people not trained on how to run the washing machines or change the bed efficiently enough? So maybe they get half the rooms one day and they run out of time, or something like that. So that's what we need to spend our time on. Not necessarily here with the issues of working amenities, because look at that gap. It's very, very small in comparison to our clean sheets gap. So if we started with amenities, we would make a difference in these overall averages and we would close the gap somewhat. But our greatest gain towards closing the gap between what our customer expects and what they perceive that they received in terms of the service, our greatest gain is right here. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to, well, we'll leave that up. I'm kind of going to gray this out for now. The Gray album. Probably some Soundgarden or Nirvana album. Just kind of Seattle gray. All right. And then we're going to unblack this. Reveal. All right, so we're going to keep our focus over here. So this is one example of something we might see. Well, let's look at another example of what we might see. So let's suppose, we have same construct here. So we have expectation survey, questions on tangibles. We have perception survey, questions on tangibles. Look at the average of the averages. So 5.7, pretty close to 5.6. I meant to make it 5.6, and I don't know, I just never got there. But let's just assume, close enough that it doesn't make a difference in terms of the validity of the comparison. And then 2.2 and 2.2, super. But when we get down to the questions, we're going to see something different. In terms of method, we're still looking at the same thing. So what is the nature of the gap between one question and its partner down here? So we're going to use that same process, and we're going to say, okay, to measure the gap, i.e. the difference, we're going to take one of those question averages and subtract it by its partners. Okay, 3.7. I'm just going to make this a little bit centered. And then when we pull this down, we find, interesting. The gaps are kind of the same. They're not the same. So not every gap is 3.8. 3.7 is not the same as 3.8, and 3.1 is certainly not the same as 3.8. But, and so to cut to the chase, we probably, in this example, we probably should prioritize this amenity issue. What in our process is keeping us from always having working amenities in any given customer's room? So when they check in, the safe works, check in, the microwave works, and the TV works. But if we started with clean sheets instead of TVs, we'd get probably the same gain once we got that thing fixed, because the differences are relatively the same. Should we start with the continental breakfast first? Well, arguably no. But when we're talking about range, the difference here, 3.8 and 3.1, that difference is 0.7. Versus over here, the difference was 5.1. So would we be technically wrong if we started with the continental breakfast and looking at root causes of what's causing that not to meet the expectations of customers? Technically we'd be wrong because we have a greater priority with the working amenities. Would we be seriously wrong? No. The point here is that maybe with this kind of data, it might be just as productive to look at tangibles, all of these things kind of as a system of systems. So rather than dividing and conquering and looking at this the way we would look at this over here, because this is an issue. It's not an isolated issue. It may not be, isn't necessarily isolated, but man, we need to fix that. Here, we could start with that, working amenities, or we could kind of work across and say tangibles as a system, subsets being sheets, breakfast, towels, and amenities. What do we got going on there? Do we have trained staff who kind of takes ownership of these? Do we have multifunctional people who can do one or two or more? Is that the problem, or is that part of the solution? So it can kind of go either way because these are so close to each other. Okay? So what is the point of this video? The point of this video is definitely to get it clear in everyone's mind that a pretty substantial answer to, when we get here, to the question of what do we do now? Well, what do we do now is we go to our priority area, we go back to the survey-specific question results that look either like this or like this. We get those pairs of questions and we start looking at the nature quantitatively of the gaps and where the greatest gap is. And then we probably want to go back into our process quality and use various methods to determine what is the root cause that needs to be addressed that is causing this gap between expectation and perception of the quality of service. Sometimes when you ask people that question, you get to this point and you say, what should we do now? And we say, okay, prioritize tangibles for action. Good answer, correct answer. Could we go deeper? Yes. When we try to go deeper, sometimes we get, well, we need to collect more data. Maybe, but not in the way that we just did. Because we have enough data from the way that we just did to know we don't need the same type of data again. So in other words, we don't need to go back to the drawing board, find 24 more customers or 25, and give them the same set of questions to see if we get the same results. That would be, in business, unnecessarily costly and arguably wasteful. We have something to go on. We have something that in the world of statistics is sound. Statistics always loves larger sample sizes, but statistics also recognizes that larger sample sizes are not always feasible, and it sets thresholds for what is acceptable of sample sizes. So a sample size of 25 is pretty reasonable in the world of statistics, pretty valid. So we can go with the results that we found, and we can act on those knowing that we're headed in the right direction. We didn't just get some outlier of 25 people, and they're the only people in the world that care about clean sheets and no one else does. So that is a way to, so just to make it clear, we don't necessarily want to collect more data in the way that we just did. If we wanted to collect more data, I wouldn't even call it collecting data. I would call it problem solving at this point, because we need to gather the housekeeping team together and the management team together and say, okay, let's lay out this process, how it's currently happening. Let's talk about our 6Ms. Let's talk about why this problem might be happening and what we can do to fix it. So if we call that collecting data, which I don't, and I don't think anybody would, that could say that's what we're doing, but I wouldn't call it collecting data. I would say getting after solving the problem, using the techniques and tools of quality, many of which we will cover in the future weeks of this course. So that's it for now on how to conduct that, quote, second pass of analysis of your Servqual. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.